Good evening to everyone here in India. And of course, I hope everyone everywhere else across the world who's listening in and watching is having a great day. I welcome you all to the third session of the Transformation Series 2020. It's all about nutrition and it's about lifestyle. We remember that in the first session, we spoke about physical fitness. And as we saw, it wasn't really about exercise. We were talking about the body's response to exercise. We were talking about the need for exercise, how each one of us needs exercise, and what is the best way to be physically active. When we spoke about mental health in the second session, it was actually about mental health. A lot of people expected that we'd be talking about mental illness, which is, of course, as we know, depression and anxiety and things like that. But we, of course, were talking about the strengths that we have as people in our minds, the ability to choose right, the ability to prioritize, the ability to focus, to concentrate, the ability to be, to determine, to have determination. And even in this session, which we have today, which is about nutrition and lifestyle, of course, a lot of people did ask me that, are we going to advise on a good diet, what's a good diet for a particular situation or so on, and what is it that we imagine when we talk about nutrition. Today, there's a lot of focus on proteins, there's a lot of focus on carbohydrates, a lot of focus on fats, and a little bit of talk about fiber and micronutrients and some of the vitamins like vitamin D and so on. But nutrition is a very, very vast subject. I mean, we in India know, and from ancient times, that food it not only affects the way our bodies function, it also affects the way our minds function. It affects who we are as people. In fact, not only just in India, across the world, in ancient times, from ancient times, doctors and philosophers have been speaking about the power of food. Hippocrates said that food is medicine, and medicine is food. There are philosophers from a couple of hundred years ago in Europe who said that you are what you eat, and of course, you are what you eat means that if you eat healthy, you might be healthy. If you eat unhealthy, you'll definitely be unhealthy. But of course, eating healthy is not just all of it. And what is eating healthy? So those are the kind of questions that we are going to discuss here today. And again, we are going to treat this in a slightly different way. We are not calling on people to discuss the good and bad attributes of various philosophies, because these are personal experiences of the panelists who are coming on today. So what we want is, we want the panelists who are coming on to explain to us their learnings. They all have done a lot of research, a huge amount of research. They are very, very experienced. How they have used their own experiences and their own learnings in their own lives to live their own lives better, to create better lifestyles for themselves, and then, of course, advise other people. But their experiences are what we are going to be looking at today. So we have a lot of questions, so I'm not going to waste more time explaining what the session is. I'm going to invite the panelists on. Our first panelist is Dr. Neal Barnard. He's from Washington. He's joining us from Washington as president of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Dr. Barnard leads programs advocating for preventive medicine, good nutrition, and higher ethical standards in research. His research contributed to the acceptance of plant-based diets in dietary guidelines for Americans. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Barnard.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be with you today.
It's so exciting, and all the way from Washington.
Yes.
Our next panelist is Anju Venkat. She's from Mumbai. She is a health counselor and holistic nutritionist, co-facilitator, and the main face of the Health Awareness Center in Mumbai. Thank you so much, Anju, for joining. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me here.
And our third panelist is joining us from the UK. He's Dr. Ruairi Robertson. He has a PhD in microbiology. His research explores the many fascinating ways that our gut microbes contribute to our health and disease, and how different diets affect these interactions. This research is uncovering new insights into the exciting influence of gut microbes on the human body and the human brain. Thank you very much, Dr. Robertson, for joining us.
Thanks very much. I'm delighted to be here.
So as we discussed, as I have mentioned to the audience, we're going to have now a series of questions that I will ask the three of you. And following that, we will take questions from the audience, and we invite the audience to add their questions below the session on Facebook. So my first question is for Dr. Barnard. Why did you see the need to start the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine?
Well, once again, thank you so much for pulling this important program together, and thank you very much for allowing me to be part of it. I started the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine in 1985. I was working at a hospital in New York City, and I was new to medical practice. And I was struck by the fact that although doctors did a good job, I thought, of diagnosing illness and of prescribing appropriate medications and procedures, we really did not do a good job when it came to prevention. And that means we didn't do anything about a heart attack until it came into the emergency room door. And we didn't do anything about breast cancer until it showed up on a mammogram. And I felt that we know to a large degree what leads to these problems. And we can intervene early so that the heart attack doesn't have to happen. And we can reduce the likelihood that the cancer will form. And so I decided to set up a group that was initially intended to be quite small, just a committee of doctors who would weigh in on these things. And of course, we've grown enormously over time, but that was the motivation.
That's wonderful. Because I mean, as we know that, Americans in India, of course, we feel that Americans have a really bad diet. Okay. So,
yeah.
No, we do. We think so. And we think also that a lot of the bad stuff is spreading across the world, and it's come to India as well. So I'm sure that your upbringing included the regular American diet. And we know that what that is. It's a lot of meat, and it's a lot of, basically it's a lot of meat, and
yeah.
and I know that you're vegan. You're vegan, and vegan, of course, is something that's still not accepted wholeheartedly across the world. There's a lot of resistance to being vegan, and a lot of that is from the medical community itself, right? So how did you realize that vegan was better? When did you? It could not have been in your profession, or you weren't taught this. You probably didn't have any kind of influence on this in your family, I think. So how did you realize that vegan was better?
I grew up in North Dakota, which is a livestock raising area of the U.S. And my father raised animals when he was young. He left that business, and he decided he didn't want to be a farmer anymore. And he went to medical school, and he became the diabetes expert for Fargo, North Dakota, where I grew up. However, we still ate very much like we were raising livestock. It was a very meaty diet, I'm sorry to say. And I even had a job working at McDonald's as a teenager. But the year before I went to medical school, I had an unusual experience. I was working in a hospital in Minneapolis, and my job was to assist the pathologist in doing autopsies. And one day a man died in the hospital of a massive heart attack. And the pathologist took the body and removed a big section of ribs from the front of the chest. And he put the ribs on the table, and he said, look inside. I was assisting him, but he knew that I was going to be going to medical school shortly, and he wanted to give me a graphic education. And he took his scalpel and he sliced open one of the coronary arteries on the front of the heart. And he said, look inside. And I had gloves on, and I looked in, and it was, instead of it being a flexible artery, it was almost crispy and calcified. And he said, that's atherosclerosis, and that's what comes from your bacon and eggs that Americans eat. And the same artery blockages were in the arteries to the brain and the arteries to the legs. And he said, this is just atherosclerosis. So at the end of the exam, he left the room, and I had to clean up. And so I put the ribs back into the chest and sewed up the skin. And when I was done, I went up to the cafeteria in the hospital, and they were serving ribs for lunch. And I want to tell you that it looked like a dead body, and it smelled like a dead body, and I realized, in fact, it is a dead body. And I didn't become a vegetarian yet, but I couldn't eat that, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. And I remembered hunting as a child and so forth and thinking there's something wrong with this picture. You can't forget something like that. So as more I learned then about the health issues, I gradually changed my diet to a vegetarian diet, and then I eliminated all animal products. And that's not the end. I mean, you then want to explore the most healthful ways of preparing vegetables and fruits and grains and beans. So it's an eternal exploration, I have to say.
That's an amazing story. And you are you 67 years old?
Don't rub it in, yes.
It's really incredible. I must tell you that.
Thank
Okay.
you.
There is a whole story about protein today in the world. And I think it's just crept up on us like suddenly. And everywhere you're hearing about food or you're hearing about nutrition, it's always protein. Where do you get your protein? How much protein do you need? What is the best source of protein? And how vegetarians don't get enough protein and how difficult it is. How did this story start? When did people start getting worried? How did they start getting worried about getting enough protein?
There has been a preoccupation about protein, but when people are low in protein in certain parts of the world during famines and during civil unrest, it's not, the truth of it is that although people have focused on protein, they're simply not getting food in general, because protein is part of the foods that you eat. If you're getting vegetables, the vegetables contain protein. If you're getting beans and lentils and peas, they contain protein. If you're having grains, they contain protein. So they all come along with it together. But I think there's been another part of this, is that for many men in particular, they have thought of it as sort of a macho thing to be eating the parts of an animal. Almost like if we eat brains, we'll be smarter. If I achieve my conquest to conquer an animal and successfully hunt and bring this home and eat the animal remains, maybe that will give me more musculature. But it's important to remember that the most muscular animals are vegan animals. I'm talking about elephants, bulls, stallions. Their body turns plants into muscles. And we, as being in the family of great apes, when we eat plants, we have no trouble extracting their protein and putting it to use.
Yeah. So these I mean, I don't want to say again what is right or wrong. It's not my place, and I'm not qualified. But the fact is that there is it seems very strange that there is so much talk about it. As you mentioned, of course, it could be an ancient thing, and we know that ancient tribes, the warriors used to eat the hearts of their enemies to get the power of the enemies and stuff like that. But today it's gone much wider than that. They say that you want to recover every day, you want to sleep better, you want more hair, you have to eat protein, and you're not getting enough. I mean, it's crazy, but I understand. I mean, I don't know why they do it, but I understand what you're saying. My next question is for Anju. So you run the Health Awareness Center in Mumbai, which is an incredible center. I mean, people really swear by it, that when you're looking at holistic lifestyle, this is where you have to go and this is where you have to learn. So when did you become aware of your body as a miracle of nature and creation? Because I've heard the talks that you give, right? Was it a particular incident? Was it a phase in your life? Your mother was a great practitioner of holistic lifestyle. Most people are incredibly unaware of the body's functions, our own body's functions or capabilities. According to you, so I'm asking you 2 or 3 questions together, okay? What are the 3 things that the human body does that everyone needs to be aware of that help you to understand how amazingly designed it is? So first, what helped you to realize how amazing your body is?
So I didn't have a eureka moment or a light bulb moment. I think I just grew up in a family that was into inquiry. And most importantly, because Dr. Venkat was a conventional dietitian, and she realized very soon, like Dr. Neal Barnard, that the reductionist method is not the way to look at food. That whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and the whole process was to look at food in a very different way, which is food groups rather than to look at it as vitamins, minerals, proteins. And therefore, she moved into the whole process of seasonal, regional, local. And it was a, slow way of understanding food. So we were never on a diet. We were never told, eat this, don't do that. So it was just that as a process where you slowly realize that if you listen into your body, you know that what to eat and when to eat is according to the structure and design of the body, while how much to eat is according to the dynamic way in which you listen to your body. So the moment you do that, then it automatically becomes an easy process. So if you look at your body like a tree, then the deeper you go into your system, it's like it's the root, and you get all the understanding from inside in order to communicate it outside. So for me, it's not a light bulb moment. It's just a journey, because health is participation. So that's what I feel.
Wow.
So
and
what are the three? Yeah.
The three things about body function that really amaze you and everybody needs to know.
One is its capacity to be able to create energy irrespective of what you eat. The body just knows how to convert it into energy. The second is its capacity to continuously regenerate, again, irrespective of what you do. And the third is its capacity to constantly want to come back to balance. So the body talks to us. We just don't know how to listen.
I don't think that's easy either. I mean, everybody says, of course, we have to listen to the body, but I know, and I say this myself when people ask me, and I've been in sport for many, more than 40 years. So I have an idea of what it means to listen to the body. But for most people, when you say listen to the body, they have no clue. So it really means you have to make that effort to spend time with yourself, to feel everything that your body is going through, and even your mind, in fact. And that brings me to my question for Dr. Robertson. Okay, I was going to ask you about the importance of the gut microbiome, but you will tell us that. But this whole panic today about hygiene, where we want to kill every single microbe and every single bacteria because we don't understand that there are many bacteria without which we would not survive, And you have also, I've heard your talks where you say that, in fact, that one story I'm going to tell, so you won't be able to tell it, where there were a group of mice that were, I think, injected with a microbe, and it changed the way they felt about cats, right? I thought it was shocking. I mean, the mice actually lost their fear of cats. And not only that, they became attracted to cats. I mean, that is how much the bacteria in our body can affect not only our body, but also our mind. So can you just tell us a little bit about the gut microbiome? Because people really don't know nothing about it. They don't know the fact that we have bacteria inside us. What do they do?
Yeah, it's a good question. Our gut microbiome, for people who don't know, is all of the microorganisms that live inside our intestines. So we have bacteria and viruses and fungi growing all over our body, on our skin, even some in our lungs, in our gut. Sorry?
Yeah. Trillions of them.
Trillions, yeah. So we are more bacterial than we are humans. There's roughly, in a kind of 70 kilogram man, there's about 40 trillion bacterial cells in the body and about 30 trillion human mammalian cells. So just on the number of cells in your body, you are more bacterial than you are human. And that doesn't even take into account viruses and fungi and all these other types of microorganisms. So, I mean, for the last couple of hundred years, I suppose, since we've learned that microorganisms can cause disease, as we see now in COVID, for many decades, we kind of took this to an extreme and kind of decided that every microorganism caused disease and we need to get rid of all bacteria. We need to, scrub our hands and wash as much as we can, disinfect every surface that we've ever touched or come into contact with. We need to, have C-section births and take antibiotics if ever we feel, in any way sick. And what we've realized over the last 20 years is that this is completely the wrong approach, and that in fact, a majority of the microbes that live inside our body and on our body are extremely, extremely important for our health in so many ways. If you think about your intestine and every bit of food and every medicine that you take orally is going through this big tube through your body, and lining that tube, your intestinal tract, is trillions and trillions of bacteria and other microorganisms. So these are the gatekeepers of what goes into your body. They decide what is being digested and what is actually going to be excreted. And so we're realizing just how important these are, not only for our nutrition in terms of what we eat, but also just every other aspect of our body, from our weight to our blood sugar levels to our bone strength, and even to how our mind works as well, which I can talk about a bit later on if you like.
Sure. No, it is absolutely fascinating. I mean, talking about proteins and carbohydrates and hydrates and fats, which is what a lot of people talk about when they talk about nutrition. I mean, when you get into it so deep, where you're discussing the cells in your body which aren't even human, which are actually responsible for a lot of body function. I mean, that is just amazing, and it's something that we really need to understand, because we can't just be saying that, okay, hygiene means killing everything that is not human. I mean, we wouldn't exist, right? So so gut microbes in fact can influence the way you think. So when you realized that, I mean, during your journey as a researcher, did you make any changes to your diet? When you understood that, these microbes need to be fed, did you think like that these microbes need to be fed better?
Definitely.
Something like that?
I mean, I studied human nutrition for my undergraduate degree. And so, as you mentioned at the start, we learn about carbohydrates, fats, and proteins and what they're broken down into. They're broken down into simple sugars, they're broken down into amino acids. But we never learn as much about fiber. And that's because fiber isn't technically a nutrient, because our body doesn't digest it on its own. And so fiber is the most neglected food source in the teachings of human nutrition. And that's because fiber is only broken down by our gut microbiota. If we didn't have all these different microorganisms inside our body, we wouldn't be able to digest fiber on our own, and it would just pass out through our body. So fiber, when we eat it, travels mainly down into the large intestine at the bottom of our intestinal tract, and it's broken down by the gut microbiome. So these gut microbes, they use that as food. That is their favorite dinner. It's their favorite lunch, is these complex carbohydrates and these different types of fibers. So they break fiber down into different molecules that we then can digest. And it's these molecules that then have these amazing effects in our body. So I definitely kind of only learned that when I began studying the gut microbiome. I didn't think about food that much when I was younger. I mean, I grew up in a household where my mom was a fantastic cook. She'd give me great food, but I never really considered what it was doing for my body. And I began to learn about the proteins and the fats in university when I studied it. And it was only really then when I kind of was lucky to be involved in the research of the gut microbiome that I kind of had this realization that actually my diet was completely lacking in fiber and in all this other kind of side of nutrition that we rarely think about because we're never taught about. So kind of what I try to do, and the tips I give to people is to, first of all, try and eat up to 30 different types of plant-based foods a week, which sounds crazy, but once you add up a different type of fruit or a different vegetable or a different olive oil or anything you eat during the day, they start kind of racking up through the week. And the other thing I'd like to suggest to people is every time you go and buy food in the supermarket is buy a new plant-based food that you've never tried before. We all are kind of guilty of going into the shop and buying the same things that we have and maybe making the same meals because we're used to them. But that kind of restricts the diversity of our diet, and it restricts the fiber that we're feeding to these gut microbes inside our intestines. So that's what I try to do myself since realizing this is try something new every time I go and shop, and you can really, it kind of opens up a world of nutrition for you and an exciting world of food as well.
Yeah. No, that's amazing, because I know so many people today are looking for a diet, and when they look for a diet, they're really restricting themselves to eating a particular kind of food in every single meal, and that's not a good thing. I mean, human beings are omnivores, and we need to eat everything according to what we feel is good for us, but not to restrict ourselves unless we know that it's not good for us at all.
Yes,
which brings me to my next question. Yeah, which is for all of you. Like that, we are surrounded by a choice of food today, in the supermarkets, in the shops. I mean, everywhere, and we're also told that there's healthy food and there's junk food. So when we say that, experiment with your food, eat whatever there is and all of that, what do you absolutely stay away from? What is junk? What really is junk? Because we use it as a loose term, fast food, junk food. What is junk food? There is a lot of food out there that's not even food. They call it food. So how would you define it, junk food? Dr. Robertson first.
How do I define junk food? I think it's important to state at first that unless you have a severe allergy, unless there's some food that has a huge health, kind of acute health effect on you, like a severe allergy, there's no food that you should never eat. And I think it's important to state, because we have to consider food in the whole context of our social environment. Some people from poorer social economic backgrounds don't have access to fantastically healthy food all the time and are only exposed to kind of unhealthier food. So in certain cases, we can only have junk food, but we want to try and limit that and just have kind of whole foods that haven't been processed as much. So the kind of westernized diet these days is one that has lots of fats and sugars added. So if you think about potato chips or fries or chocolate and candy, or processed burgers or things like that, they all have lots of these kind of fats and oils and sugars added to them. So although these are okay on occasion, we want to be limiting them as much as possible, and instead taking a kind of whole fruits and whole vegetables, beans and nuts and seeds. So these are the ones you want to be focusing on more, instead of the things that are, let's say, packaged and processed and have thousands of ingredients on them. We want to kind of limit those and instead go for the things that don't have plastic packaging around them, the things that have just come out of the ground or just come out of the sea or just come off the farm, that can be used yourself and kind of your own spices and ingredients added to them.
Right. Anju, junk food in the Indian context.
From the Indian context. Well, the first thing is, I think that, like Dr. Robertson said, that to break food down into good and bad and healthy, unhealthy, and junk and no junk is not actually the way to do it, because you can't label food, because every species eats food for its survival. So food is meant to be for the structure to be created, and it's an instinctive, intuitive mechanism, and we are given taste to know the difference between poisonous and non-poisonous. That's why that has been given. So a child, when it's born, instinctively asks for food, and when it cries, it's not saying give me biscuit or chips or Maggi noodles. So that's not what it is. So we must know, why are we eating food? Which is, are we eating for nourishment, for pleasure, for indulgence? What is its reason? And once we have that understanding, then automatically you will move towards eating food for nourishment and know how to balance the others automatically. But simply put, the other way of looking at foods that don't help you I would just say foods that you can't wash. So fruits, vegetables, nuts, beans, anything that you can wash is food. Anything you can't wash,
Wow. Yeah.
let it go.
Okay, all right. Because I mean, I know how difficult it is, even though Dr. Robertson advises to limit. For most human beings, to limit is not something that they can do very easily. That's why to remove it completely is sometimes I think the best way. Yes, like
It's
Dr.
to
Barnard,
balance.
you're a vegan. Obviously, we know that you feel that meat and animal products definitely are not something that are healthy for the human being. So what is your idea of what is healthy and unhealthy or junk? What food should we absolutely stay away from?
Yes. May I say, I like the idea of foods that you can wash. That's a lovely idea. I'm going to have to practice that for the rest of the week and get to, I think that's a very interesting concept. Thank you. There are 4 groups that I think of as the essential foods, and those are vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and the legume group, or pulses, meaning beans and peas and lentils. And those are really the essentials. There are some foods such as nuts and seeds that you can add every now and then. Back in the 1950s and 60s, people used the word junk food to refer to things that had calories but didn't give anything else. So candy and potato chips were in that group. And they would, back in the old days, they would consider meat not to be junk food because it delivered a big load of protein. However, today, we know that that big load of animal protein isn't a benefit at all. It's no more beneficial than the salt on potato chips or the grease in candy. You don't need that at all. And of course, as time has gone on, we've started to think of this concept of junk as not just what's harmful to our body, but what's destroying the earth that our children need to live in. And also, animals in the United States have been viewed as nothing more than resources, something you can get some cash from. And I'm happy to say that some people are adopting a view that has been explored and thoughtfully transmitted in India since time immemorial, that animals are not simply things for humans to possess, that they're beings in their own right. And rather than westernizing India, I think it would be lovely to easternize the United States so that we can take advantage of some of this wisdom. So despite the fact that I grew up eating animals and so forth, and despite the fact that my expertise is in research and in human health, and I'm a doctor and I'm a fellow of the American College of Cardiology, and so I'm not a philosopher. However, I've come to regret having taken animals' lives in my own life. I hunted and with my father and drove animals to slaughter. I now think that if I had to put a category of junk food, I would put meat, dairy products, and eggs right at the top of the list of things that I no longer wish to include as food. And I just can't view them that way anymore. And were I at a restaurant or at someone's house and they wanted to serve something like that, I would be more than happy to find an alternative to it.
Wonderful. I think especially because of the kind of choices that we have today and the kind of accessibility to almost everything that we wish for, I think we all need to be a certain type of philosopher to really think about, even though we have the access, do we really need to indulge every single desire that we have? What is really best for us, mind, body, and soul? I think it's very interesting. I don't know how deep people want to go into that, but it's definitely a very, very interesting idea. Okay, when it comes to food again, and we all understand how food affects the way we feel. So we may not be really sick, but we might just feel a little tired or something like that. Or, we all have, mild allergies sometimes, which now we know are signals. Again, when you're saying listen to the body, it's a signal that you're getting, that when you get an allergy or you feel tired, a chronic tiredness, or even a mild illness like a mild flu, how do you use food to combat that? I know Anju has spoken a lot about it, so I'd like you to go first. How do you use food to balance your body? Because we know it's not just food. We have so many influences on us all the time. It's the work that we do, our relationships, we are so busy, and all these things, stress, that affect our health. So how do we use food as a tool? I mean, I hate to call food a tool, but how do we use food to combat all these little discomforts that come up with our daily lives?
So first is, I would say that the only person who's going to combat it is your defense system. So it's only the body who's going to get you actually back to normal. Yes. Food acts as a support, which means that all foods require time to get digested, and all foods can either create nourishment or create some amount of toxicity. So when you are going to eat foods that will take less time to process internally in your body, which is digestion is only one of the functions that your body cannot do later. The moment you put food in your mouth, 10 organs start working. You have no refrigerator in your stomach. So what's important is to know that you need food as a support, because the moment you've got any symptom, it's your body is wanting to tell you that your credit has come down, energy reserves have come down, and the body is not able to do the function. You're moving towards inflammation, and you need to change that. So what will food do? Support you. So eat a food that takes time to process, eat a food that's non-toxic, and eat a food that can give the body the energy to complete this task, which is to build reserves. And that again goes back into seasonal, regional variety of all natural foods. That's what you will need.
So just to be a little bit more specific, like I mentioned, allergies. When you have an allergy, it could be a rash or something like that. It is some signal that your body is giving you that it's not happy. How do you find the cause of that? Or is it important to find the cause of that, or just again go into a simpler regimen of the food that you're eating? Or do you need to go
Sorry, do you need to go deeper? Well, I think that each symptom is a communication of which part of the life cycle of health your body is not being able to complete. So an allergy means it's a high immune response, which means your radar is continuously on. The amount of sleep you've had is less. Your stress levels are higher. You're not giving variety in the type of food you're eating. And most importantly, your food has become undigested matter, which means you've not eaten it in the right manner. So that's why this will occur. So if it's an allergy, means you've gone into complete debit. Your body's immune response is moved into a hyper state. If you have chronic fatigue, which is your low in energy, means again you've spent more than you've earned, which is you've not looked at the inputs that your body needs. You've only looked at what I would term as hurry, worry, and curry. You've just been running, you've overloaded your digestive system. So that's why that has happened. So every symptom that our body gives is very clearly telling us which part of the life cycle that your body is not doing. Is it not making energy? Is it not doing immune boosting? Is it not doing growth and repair? It's a dynamic process, and it's important to understand that. And in that, when you look at what food to eat, you're giving your body digestive rest, and you're making your body help the liver neutralize acid faster. That's the best you can do.
Thank you, Anju. Dr. Barnard, if you felt a chronic tiredness or suddenly came up with an allergy or flu, what would you do? So again, we're talking preventive here.
Yes. Interesting thing. With regard to allergic responses to foods, there is another technique that we have sometimes used, particularly for autoimmune conditions, such as rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, migraine, Sjogren's disease, and many others. And that's to try to see if there is a particular food that the body is responding to. And so we will often start by eliminating animal products and go to a vegan diet. But then you discover that a vegan diet includes 5,000 possible foods that you could still be reacting to. So what we will then do is if a person still has symptoms, for example, their joints still hurt, at that point, we might go to a very limited diet with foods that we know everyone tolerates pretty well, like rice, cooked vegetables. And you don't worry about the amount. You let them eat till they're full, but it's a very limited diet. And after a couple of weeks, very often the symptoms will settle down. Then you can bring back the foods that you had excluded, but do it one at a time. So if you've taken out, I'm going to say tomatoes, for example, you bring the tomatoes back in, and for a day or 2 days, you eat a lot of tomatoes to see if it triggers the reaction. If it doesn't, then you keep them and you bring in the next food, which might be citrus fruits. You eat a lot of it, see if it causes a reaction. If it doesn't, you keep it. And then you gradually bring back foods and see which one causes the problem. What we very often see is that people are reacting not just to one food, but to 2 or 3. And when they avoid those foods, they just feel better. Quite often, these are foods that are not necessarily foods that people have eaten for the millennia. If I'm inclined to believe that we as a species began in Africa, probably Northeast Africa, and from there we spread throughout the rest of the world. And we found foods that we wouldn't have traditionally eaten, like tomatoes or peanuts or potatoes. And some people tolerate them very well and others don't. So that's a technique we use. I might also add that if a person has tiredness because they've got the flu or some other kind of infection, there what we need to do is to boost the white blood cells and our immune system in general. Getting away from greasy foods is good. Some people have made a case for garlic. Some of those people work for the garlic industry, so I'm not entirely sure if it's true or not, but some of the research has been favorable. And generally speaking, what we're finding is getting away from fatty foods is really important because your white blood cells don't work very well in an oil slick.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to things like garlic, India has a long history in understanding the impact of food, especially like food like garlic and turmeric, which now in the West we see they're being termed the superfoods. And now, of course, everybody just wants to have an entire diet made up of superfoods.
Right.
And that also may not be such a good idea. So, of course, the important thing is to understand that there is no quick fix to anything. Even to understanding yourself better, to understand how your body functions, to understand how it responds, you have to spend time and you have to focus and you have to concentrate. And that, hopefully, people will be more and more willing to do. So the same question for Dr. Robertson, if you felt, and this now, you have to tell us what you're going to do with your gut bacteria. If you suddenly felt very, very tired or chronic tiredness or allergy, what would you do? Would you eat a particular kind of food? Would you stay away? What would you do?
So I think I'm going to roll back to how allergies actually manifest in the first place. There's really interesting research to show that it's actually the first microbes that we're exposed to on our gut may actually predict whether we are more susceptible to get allergies or get some of these auto-inflammatory conditions later in life. And so babies, the very first food they eat might actually determine whether they become allergic or they have asthma or some of these inflammatory conditions. So from the very start of life, breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life exclusively is really, really important at preventing allergies later on. So that's from the very beginning of life. If I had a choice now, I'd say I'd be breastfed for 6 months. But later on, if we're talking, allergies or say maybe a more acute illness that Anju was kind of mentioned, our body needs energy. If we are feeling extremely drained, if we feel that we've no energy and we maybe have come down with a virus, our immune system has been dampened. So first and foremost, we need energy. And sometimes, even though it might seem a bit contradictory, we need some sort of simple form of energy. It might actually be you need some simple sugars. You might need some quicker forms of fats and sugars to get that energy back in the short term. But in the long term, you want to think, is my diet more, does it need to be more balanced in the whole? And so from my line of work, most people, again, have a very restricted diet. They're always relying on the same foods. They might have the same thing for breakfast, the same thing for lunch, and maybe a choice of 2 or 3 different dinners. So it goes back to trying these different types of nuts, try a different type of bean, or try a different type of vegetable or whole grain that you haven't had, so that you can begin to build up that diversity in your diet. The other kind of types of foods that I'm interested in terms of the gut microbiome, and which have shown some evidence, is for kind of preventing you get sick or picking up viral infections or allergies, is foods containing some of these healthy microbes as well. So fermented foods, things like yogurt or sauerkraut, these are kind of foods I suppose in the more traditional Western diet, have lots of these healthy microbes in them. And some studies have shown that if you kind of isolate some of these microbes and what are known as probiotics, these healthy bacteria that you can take as pills or supplements, some studies have shown that these can actually reduce the amount of kind of days you feel sick with a viral infection, for example, or reduce your risk of picking up an infection in the first place. So from my point of view, we need to kind of not only look at yourself, your kind of the energy that you're putting into your own body, but the energy that you're feeding your gut microbiome as well is so important, because we are not just one organism living on our own as a human. We are what we call a holobiont. We live in this ecosystem of microbes and humans at the same time, and we need to learn to feed both, especially when we're feeling sick.
So you're saying you don't really need to, I mean, it sounds very technical when you talk about it. And of course, we can't learn as much about the bacteria and the microbes as much as you know. And it's not even necessary. What you say is we need to keep having a varied diet. We need to keep experimenting and figuring out what are the things that our body is not happy with and what it's happy with. And then just keep varying our experience.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to choose how you would know if you had a healthy microbiome, it's very hard to do, because your microbiome, Milind, will be very different to mine because of where you live, because of what you eat. That doesn't mean that either of our microbiomes is healthy or unhealthy, but the one marker we can tell is if you have a diverse microbiome, if you have as many different types of species of bacteria and fungi and these other microorganisms living in your gut. And the way that you can increase that diversity is by feeding them all these different types of foods. Because you have so many different types of bacteria and other microorganisms in your gut, each of them require different types of foods for them to grow and to proliferate. And they mainly grow and proliferate on fiber, which we get from beans and whole grains and different vegetables. Even different spices are really good at stimulating the growth of some of these healthy bacteria. So really, the easiest advice you can give is to increase diversity in your diet. Try new things each time you go and shop.
Yes, absolutely. And even that has become difficult, because now you get anything that you want. Earlier, you could get a particular vegetable only in summer. Now you can get it in winter, you get it in the fall, you get it anytime you want. So it becomes again more difficult, because there's more of a choice and we can't choose. We can't choose not to eat our favorite vegetable, even though we're getting it out of season. And I think in the Indian context, and I'm sure Anju will agree, the Indian diet is so wonderfully directed by locality and seasonality. So far it really is. I mean, the food that I eat at home, that I know everybody that I know in India and across India, in different climates, different regions, they mostly eat what is local and what is seasonal. And of course, there is a lot of temptation now to say that, oh, I love this and I want to eat this every day. And then people are importing it from different regions and stuff like that. But Anju, you agree with me, right? The Indian diet really, it encourages what Dr. Robertson is talking about, because the variety keeps changing with the season. Even if you stay in the same locality for the 60 or 80, 100 years of your life, your diet will keep changing with the seasons, which is really fantastic. And I think that goes completely with what Dr. Robertson says is healthy. So that's really, really amazing. And I hope Indians realize how lucky they are. My next question is again for each one of you. How much And because again, we are talking here about understanding the body and having faith, trusting the body as well. So how much do you trust your body to take care of itself when it comes to infection or just feeling under the weather and so on? And when do you decide that it needs help, that you have to maybe go and see somebody? A lot of people have this question because today I know there's a lot of awareness about the fact that, we don't need to run to the doctor every single time. But what is that moment that you feel that it's okay if this happens, but if this happens, it's not? And I know it's a difficult question because it could do with different illnesses, you have different symptoms and so on. But generally, what would you say? What would you say personally, Dr. Barnard?
What a great question. And it's a very timely question because now when we're dealing with the COVID pandemic, people will be understandably concerned. If I have a little cough, do I need to do more, or can I simply eat healthy foods and rest and recover? I want to take a humble attitude toward this. I'm not sure I know that the answer is the same for every condition, because there are certain conditions where you can mount a bit of a fever and it's not going to be terribly dangerous. With COVID-19, when the fever gets too high, it can be a sign of bad things to come. So I'm inclined to think that we do need to look at the diseases that are around us and make some decisions based on the threats that are most immediate. With COVID, if a person is having impaired breathing and evidence of a high fever, those are times where whatever you're doing, it's not enough and we need extra help. I would make maybe one other small comment, and that is, generally speaking, the body does have wisdom. And when your body says, I'm tired, I really do need to rest now, that's sometimes actually good advice. And it's time to stop pushing ourselves to rest. I want more water, I need healthy foods. But there are unfortunately other times where our bodies tell us lies. And this wasn't really possible before modern technology brought our bodies things to lie about. But when our body tells us things like, I really want to have candy now, and I want to have a cigarette, and I want to have a line of cocaine, these are all things that were simply impossible before. But because our brains will produce dopamine, it gives us a pleasure response, and because dopamine can be elicited by tobacco, alcohol, and every drug of abuse, and even certain foods like cheese, sometimes we think that our body is asking for a food for healing purposes when it's actually looking for a little bit of a thrill. So we have to, I think, listen to our bodies, but be a little bit skeptical about certain things.
Yeah. No, I know also there is these things are marketed to you. I mean, not cocaine, not publicly, but
hopefully not.
There are so many things that are marketed to you that are designed to, just give you a hit, because your brain is designed in a certain way to respond to a certain taste, as Anju was talking about, where the taste buds. But taste buds are meant to tell us what is poisonous and what is not. But these are being manipulated today to change the way we think. So the body, as you said, the body begins to lie because it doesn't realize, it doesn't understand that it is being fooled by technology that human beings have developed. So
there are, in fact, there are whole teams of people in the United States and elsewhere that are trying to figure out exactly the right proportion of sugar and cocoa butter that will make a chocolate bar that is absolutely irresistible. So it's certainly not an individual's fault, and there are people dangling these things in front of us all the time.
Yeah. So how do you realize that? So would you say that, and as we got earlier, that if you can't wash it, you need to really think about it, as food, that packaged food would contain substances, of course, that give it a greater shelf life as well, but also are designed to make you want them more. Should you just stay away from packaged food? Would you say that? Would you say minimize it? What would you say?
No, I don't think so. I think there are some foods that, as you say, are packaged in order to be able to be transported to places where they can do some good. However, there are certain foods in the foods that are in the seductive but not healthy category. Relatively few things. Sugar is one. And I'm not speaking here of fruit sugars. Those are natural and healthful for us, but I'm talking about the added sugars.
Yeah.
Chocolate is something that, as delicious as it is, I don't really think can be considered an essential food. I'm going to argue that cheese is that way as well. Cheese actually has opiates in it that come from the casein protein, and people tend to get a bit hooked on it. It's the one food that our research participants have the most trouble getting away from. Meat, the same story. And part of the reason that we know that these foods are calling to us, not for physiological reasons, or I should say not for nutritional reasons, but for reasons of brain chemistry, is that we can use the drug naloxone in a research study where I will give, say, a chocolate addict some naloxone, which you use normally in treating drug addiction, and it will wipe out the effect of heroin, for example. If you give it to a person who just binges on chocolate, you discover that they no longer have much interest in chocolate. It tastes the same, but the brain effect is gone. And by the way, this is not a treatment. This is just a research tool that helps us to see for which foods are you eating it for nourishment, or are you eating it for a brain effect in the reward area. Sugar, chocolate, cheese, and meat are in that category.
Wow, thank you for that insight. Anju, how much do you trust your body? If you have an infection, when do you think it's time to look for help?
So I trust my body completely. I think body knows what to do, but we need to know the difference between chronic and acute. So most of the symptoms that we feel are because of a manifestation of the lifestyle choices that we have. And that's why you'll have, whether it's low energy, whether it's toxins getting piled up, whether it's growth not happening. And that's what then you'll see as imbalances in your body. And these are all chronic. And that's what we then try to suppress. Now, an acute process is when you need support, you know. So you rupture an artery, you go and have a fracture, you go and eat something that's poisonous, or something goes into your, you need that. So medical support or going in for help from the outside, we have to know is only to get our body back to homeostasis. So it can always needs to be only short term. The long-term approach towards health is to understand the body, give it what it wants, and see to it that chronic symptoms don't come. So dis-ease is the body not at ease. So
Right.
if you listen to it, then you're going to move from I of illness to we of wellness. That's a quick thing that happens. So you have to know the difference between acute and chronic. So something sudden, something that manifests from the outside, definitely needs intervention immediately. But something that slowly your body is communicating to you that you're not creating the right lifestyle choices, drugs and medicine is not the way to go.
Not the answer. Okay. Dr. Robertson, how much do you trust your body?
I trust my body because I know I'm kind of relatively young and healthy. And so I think it's important, you know, that we think of this again in the context of, you know, we're living in a COVID era. So, or even if you look at any other infection like flu or any disease, if you are very young, if you're very old, or if you're immunocompromised, that means you have to be a bit more on guard and maybe not trust your body as much. I'm lucky at this stage of my life to be able to trust my body, where if I am feeling sick for a couple of days, I know that my immune system is strong enough to fight off this infection unless I'm really, really feeling, you know, I can't get out of bed. Seasonal infections happen. You know, we have a bit of a cough and cold in non-COVID times, which usually pass within a couple of days. And we don't need to, you know, rely on going to the doctor and, for example, take antibiotics all the time. We might need to look more at these more kind of chronic effects, as Anju was mentioning. So
Right.
if I'm going to answer this maybe from an intestine point of view, because, you know, that's my focus is the gut. And lots of people think that maybe bloating or other symptoms in their intestines or diarrhea or things like that are part of their kind of normal lives, whereas really our westernized diets have kind of led to that. And so if I felt like that for more than a week, I'd know that my diet wasn't right. It's fine. Sometimes if I eat too much at one meal, I might feel a little bit bloated. I might have a bit of gas. I might, have a few issues. But too many people that I know and friends of mine just think that having these intestinal problems are just part of normal life. And I know that's because they have really poor diets and poor lifestyles. And so if they can introduce just a few more vegetables, a few more grains or nuts or seeds, just one at a time, very slowly over the course of their diet, and incorporate that to become a kind of more long-term change, these kind of chronic effects on their body that they're feeling will tend to go away.
Fantastic. Yes. So it's the same with me. I trust my body completely. And in fact, I don't know when that I might think that I need to seek help, but it's been like this my entire life. And I think it comes from the previous generation as well, because my mother doesn't, believe in seeking help. I mean, I think that could be to a fault, but all four of my grandparents were doctors. So there is a kind of insight into what doctors actually do, because in India, and I think in many parts of the world, doctors are seen as God figures. So we feel that any little thing that goes wrong, we need to run to them, but we need to also understand the power that we have. And that power can only be uncovered once we spend time with ourselves and really are aware of the kind of lives that we're leading and what we're doing to our bodies. So this is a very a question that I personally want the answer to. Food, exercise, and sleep are considered to be the pillars on which good health depends. Everybody says that. You need to sleep well, you need to eat well, and you need to be active, right? Which of these is the most important to you? I don't know if you exercise or your sports people or anything, but which of you is the most important? And is there any other aspect to life that you consider more important when it comes to physical and mental health, more important than food, exercise, and sleep? So Anju goes first.
Okay. So I think the pillars are actually like 4 tires in a car. So it's not just food and exercise and sleep. The 4th tire I'll add in is breath. And they work together. They are in a constant cyclic process, because if you're not in rest, you're not going to be able to sleep, which means you're not going to restore function. And only in rest can you even absorb nourishment, because you can't fill petrol in a running car. So sleep and rest is needed for nourishment to go in. And only once you nourish yourself will you have pure oxygenated blood to reach your muscles to be able to move, because exercise is an output that you want from your muscle, while the muscle itself needs pure oxygenated good blood. So each feeds the other. And if we don't have a strong structure, you're automatically not going to be able to breathe better, which means you won't know from where your breath comes. And your breath is actually the communication channel to tell you, where are you? Are you stressed? Are you in peace? Where are you? So to me, these 4 they work together. Each feeds the other. So that is what it is.
So do you do something for your breath? Do you do any exercise, or how do you strengthen it, or how do you become more aware of it? Is it meditation? Is it, as in India we have, of course, the discipline called pranayama? What exactly do you do? We all know how to sleep, we know how to eat, and we know how to exercise. But how do we deal with the breath?
With your first breath, you're alive, and with your last breath, you're dead. So you don't have to do anything with breath. Breath comes to you. It's a question of knowing where is your breath. Are you breathing from upper chest? Are you breathing from your abdomen? So it's just a question of taking a pause every couple of hours and seeing, where am I? Where's my breath? Because your breath will tell you where your mind is. Your breath will tell you whether your muscles are contracted or not. Your breath will whether you're fighting or you're in growth and repair. So it is there. But these four work together. But when you ask me the question of, so again, with breath, it's not prana. It's not a technique, because that's not the way breath works.
Right.
Breath is dynamic. But what is it that I think that we have forgotten about is we don't ask our body what we want. We only tell our body what we don't want. So we tell our body we don't want sugar, high sugar. We want our weight to come down. We want to lose weight. We focus on what we don't want, which is an illness process. While we are a living, thinking species, and every action of even taking in nourishment or knowing how to sleep or to move or to breathe will only come when the instruction is right. So what's most important is to tell your body what you want. Because in every other field, if I want to go to a vegetable vendor, I don't say, don't give me okra, don't give me carrots, don't give me cabbage when I want tomato. I ask what I want. But with our body, we don't ask for what we want. So I think that's important. So if we know four of it works together and we ask what we want, life is good.
So a kind of positive affirmation. So you keep telling your body that you want it to be a certain way. I mean, I would
you
say
want a strong structure. Yeah.
What I wanted to actually figure out was the difference between sleep and rest. Because of course everybody thinks they're resting when they sleep, but according to you, it's two different things completely.
No. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you need to during the day at some point spend some time with yourself.
Yeah.
At rest, and then sleep is something else that gives you something else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because rest is of three types. It's physical rest, which is your structure needs that, but it's sensory rest, which means are you looking out or in? And most importantly, it's also digestive rest. Are you allowing the liver to not break down food and allowing it to filter? Are you allowing it to support the microbiome? So it's all types of rest. And unless you're in rest, you're not going to sleep well. And if you don't sleep, you won't eat. And if you don't eat, you won't move. And if you won't move, you won't breathe. It's together. But once you learn the dance, it's beautiful.
No, I'm sure. No, I know that it's important that you need to be at rest before you sleep. Otherwise, you don't even sleep well. I'm aware.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Barnard, the same question: food, exercise, and sleep. Which is the most important to you, or is there something else?
And I think I would give you almost the same answer, I have to say, because as important as I think food is, I think food is critically important. It's when it's the right foods, food is medicine. When it's the wrong food, it's really poison. However, if a person has not slept well, the next day they will eat anything just to get through the day because their resolve is shot, and they're using foods to prop them up. And if you don't exercise, then your muscles aren't very tired, and your muscles will not demand sleep, so your sleep will be light. Plus, I have to say, when you're exercising, if you are running a triathlon, that's not a time when you can eat a bowl of ice cream anyway, so it has that benefit too. So I think all of these really do work together. I might also say that one doesn't replace another. Sometimes people will say, well, I can eat all kinds of unhealthy foods, I'll just exercise it off. But you quite soon discover that you can take in a whole lot more calories than you can easily burn off. So it's important to eat well, exercise, as well as sleep.
That's right. Everything has to be there in balance.
Yeah.
Okay. But this is interesting. Rest, I didn't consider that. Dr. Robertson, what would you say is your most important pillar of mental and physical health?
I think I'd have to say nutrition out of those three, by nature of just my enjoyment of food. I don't only get nutrition out of it. I enjoy cooking. I enjoy eating. And I think that is so important for your physical and mental health as well, that you can enjoy the process. But if I can add a fifth tire to Anju's car, it would probably be our kind of social surroundings are so important for our mental and physical health as well. And there's fascinating studies of some of the people, the communities in the world that live the longest. And not only do they have these really kind of diverse, healthy diets, those that build exercise into their daily lives, they're not running triathlons, they're just working outside all the time, or they might walk to the shop, they don't drive. But not only that, they have a great social environment as well. And I think that's so important, not only for our mental health, but also our physical health as well. That if we are happy and we have friends and family who also live kind of happy and healthy lives, that can actually physically can improve your health as well. And kind of believing in the health and the value of your body is really important. My sister is actually a psychologist, and a lot of her research showed that people who believe that aging isn't a bad thing are actually physically more stronger and less frail. If you believe that getting older has these negative connotations, is associated with less power or frailness or older, physically your body isn't as good. So those kind of psychological aspects of your life and the social environment are just as important as these other kind of three main pillars that you've spoken about.
Yes, absolutely. I think a positive mindset, an enjoyment of life, and having good relationships, I think would be very, very important too, because I mean, you can't discount the fact that your mind actually drives everything. If your mind is disturbed, nothing else is going to work, right? So yeah, that's fantastic. I just want to ask all of you, because you've got really busy lives, and there are a lot of questions. I mean, there's a new diet today which is around intermittent fasting, right? And even in the Indian context, we do believe in fasting for health sometimes. How important is it for you to establish the time to eat? Or is it important at all? So, Dr. Barnard.
I have to say I'm not a particularly talented cook, nor am I very patient, but I've discovered that if I don't take the time to prepare healthful foods, that I'm just not going to eat healthy foods. And to me, it's very, very important. So every morning I make a good breakfast, and I try to make some extra so that the next morning will not require so much time. So yes, I think it's essential.
Okay. But do you think that to eat at a particular time is important? And do you try to do that? There are lots of people who even skip, like I said about intermittent fasting, it's like you don't eat for maybe, I think it's 18 hours or 20 hours or something like that. Then the particular time at which you eat. How important is it to eat at the right time? Or a particular time?
I do find that for me, it's helpful to stick to a routine. And when I first heard about intermittent fasting, it sounded about as sensible as intermittent breathing. I thought that, people really do need to eat, and they shouldn't go without food. That said, there have been people, in fact, my colleague at the Physicians Committee, Dr. Hanna Kaliova, has done some studies on various approaches to food frequency, and has found that in contrast to what we had thought maybe 20 years ago, that eating many small meals over the course of the day was best, she will often encourage people to eat only 2 meals. One large one in the morning and another very large one in the early afternoon, and that's it. I haven't adopted that myself, but I've been really quite interested to see the results that she gets as a result of that. The only comment I would have about fasting is, although I am impressed not only by how some people have done well with intermittent fasting, and I'm also impressed by the results of some longer term fasts where people have done water fasts for many weeks. My caution is that if you are going to do fasting for more than a couple of days, it must be done under close supervision because it's dangerous. And secondly, fasting should not be used as an excuse for overeating. If a person is eating 5 days and fasting for 2 days, and after a couple of weeks they start to eat extra foods during those 5 days in anticipation of not eating the other 2 days, it can, I think, do more harm than good.
Yeah, I think that could do with also not understanding your own goal well, to know why you're doing it, and to be happy with the reasons that you're doing it. I think when you have those two things, that you're really sure this is the goal that I want to achieve, and these are the reasons I want to achieve this goal, I think that you probably wouldn't go to the other extreme like that, and it might probably work better for you.
I'm sure you're right.
Yeah. So Anju, I've also heard you talking about the fact that we do these 3 meals a day, the breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it's such a structured thing. What do you feel about that? Eating at the right time or a particular time? I mean, it could be your own time. You say that I will only eat once a day, or I will only eat twice a day. What is that? How important is that? Or maybe I won't eat at all one day.
So time is chronological and biological. What you're talking about is chronology, which is
Yes.
a man-made clock.
Yes.
Body internally has thousands of clocks, which has its own life cycles to work on. So
Yeah.
which clock are we talking about? So again, then it comes to that when we look at food, food is a process that takes time to digest. And food doesn't only need to be digested. It needs to be digested, assimilated, absorbed, and eliminated. There's a
Right.
process and it takes time. So if you are going to continuously put food in your mouth, or like Dr. Barnard said, the whole aspect of grazing, which is eat smaller meals at regular intervals, or get into intermittent fasting, you're not actually knowing what are you doing. So when do you eat? When you're hungry. Your body will give you have to understand that. But technically, if you're putting in cooked food, you ideally put it in at the time that there's maximum digestive capacity, which is seen through the circadian rhythm, as our digestive juices are at highest between the chronological clock of 12 in the afternoon to 8 in the night, which is when the sun is up. So if you eat at that time, your cooked food, and the rest of the time you eat more pre-digested variety of food, which is fruit or vegetables, then what happens is you are not overloading the system. And that then is how you would work on it. But when will you fast? When will you eat more? When will you eat less? Body decides. Body is the boss. So it's again a question of, can you go in and understand this process? So
Right.
Function should not happen from outside, but from inside.
Yes. So again, you have to be as aware as you can be. And I think it's a never-ending process to learn how the body works, because I think even at different ages, your body behaves differently. I mean, I've noticed it myself. When I was in my 20s, I was in my 30s or 40s, and now in my 50s. My body, of course, there is an aging process, and it behaves differently. And one must be constantly in touch with it and to understand it and give it what it needs. Yeah. So, yes, Dr. Robertson.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. Is there isn't a clear, direct answer to it. If we look at across the world, if you try and go to a restaurant, say in the US, it's going to be busiest at maybe 6:30 p.m. in the evening. Where if you go to a restaurant in Spain or Italy, it's 10 p.m. People will start eating. So there's no one answer about when we should be eating. And I completely agree with Anju that a lot of the time you do have to listen to your body about when your body knows that it's best to eat. I actually have my dinner quite late in the evening. I don't know, is that good for me? It seems to work, but I kind of would eat maybe like a Mediterranean person at 9 or 10. But there is interesting research about intermittent fasting that you said. It's still relatively new. So we don't know exactly does this work for everyone, but some people find that if they can maintain it, that not eating for those 16 hours of your 24 hours actually helps their metabolic health, helps them lose a bit of weight, helps them, their blood sugar go down. But some people that just doesn't work for them, and they have to kind of try maybe eating smaller meals throughout the day. And so we have these kind of personalized effects to food that we really need to tune into. And it's very hard to give globalized advice for everyone to say you should eat this now and when. But some very new research actually shows that in some people, unfortunately for people like me, if you do eat later, it does seem that actually you do seem to extract more calories from food. And actually it might be worse for your blood fat and your blood sugar if you eat very late at night. Of course, it doesn't happen to everyone. I find that I'm quite healthy and I tend to eat quite late. But this is an area called Chrono nutrition, and it's a kind of expanding field where if someone already has problems with their health, that maybe they should try and move and eat a little bit earlier in the evening actually might help them a little bit.
Wow, Chrono nutrition. I'm hearing that for the first time
today.
But I must tell you that that, of course, when I was in my 20s, it was the same. I could eat late, I could eat, and it didn't bother me at all. In fact, I used to have dinner sometimes at 11:30 in the night, sometimes at midnight. But now I realize that if I eat late, I don't sleep well. I notice it. I realize it. So I don't. I stopped it. I started having dinner as early as 5:30 and 6 in the evening, and then I don't eat at all after that, and I sleep much better. So again, it is important to be in touch with what the body is saying and figure it out for yourself. Like you said, there can't be a generalization. I mean, we are too much, too individual, and we need to really figure out. In fact, a lot of people say, when they say eat traditional food, sometimes they don't digest traditional food well. Sometimes they're uncomfortable with traditional food. That they've been eating in that same place, in that location for generations. And who knows, it could be, again, something to do with technology, again, something to do with the way food is processed. We don't know. But again, when you listen to your body, you experiment, then you can get at the right diet or the right combination of foods that is best for you. Okay. Now we're going more into lifestyle, because this session is about nutrition and lifestyle, and I think they're very, very closely linked. And the question is for Anju, that if you had a job, because we were talking about circadian rhythms and so on, right? The body has its own rhythm, and there are thousands of clocks inside your body and maybe even inside the mind, and we have to see how they're all balanced and how they all work. So if you had a job with a night shift, and I'm sure there are many people out there who might want to know about this, or have to be working on a project with a team, say in the US, where they are 10 hours behind, and you have to be alert at that time to deal with that team, how would you protect your body and mind or bring balance to your life? Because I've heard you saying that this could be detrimental to your physical and mental health, to not follow the circadian rhythm. So how would you protect it? It's a necessity. You have to do this job.
So body has the capacity to adapt, and we need to know that it's adaptability we want and not copeability. So is your body going to cope with keeping up in the middle of the night, keeping up the whole night, sleeping during the day? Is it going to cope? Of course it's going to cope, but that's short term. So if you wanted to adapt towards optimization, what you have to know that there is a certain function your body was going to do in the night, because in darkness, there is a life cycle. There's a melatonin release. There's a temperature balance your body does. There's growth and repair. There's some action happening, which is very, very crucial. What do? You make up that sleep during the day, but you see to it that you sleep in darkness. Your brain is going to be alert because there's light. There's a serotonin action. So you'll have to shut down your senses. So it's darkness, it's music, it's seeing to it that there's no sound. You make your body sleep at another time, but you make up your sleep. And 7 to 9 hours of sleep is non-negotiable, especially when you are working in the night. The second is that you are changing the metabolic action of the body. So what your body can do more efficiently in the day, you're making it do in the night. And what it does efficiently in the night, you want to do it in the day. So there are two things that you need to do then. One is to conserve energy. So during that period that you are awake, conserve energy again through pausing. So every couple of hours, just shut your eyes, do deep breathing. Keep temperature balance by doing some coolant, which is an ice pack, or just shut your body. Definitely that's not the period to go and run a marathon. That would be the period to be able to do a little more relaxation movement and add more energy. So that wouldn't be the period to get into indulging, eating for memory, eating for pleasure. That would be the period to eat more nourishing food, which will conserve energy and give energy. So if you adapt to the new change, understand that metabolically you're making your body work harder, conserve energy through your senses, which is all senses, and add better nourishment, then you're going to sail through that process without consequence. You won't do growth, but you won't have a side effect.
Wonderful. I think a lot of people will take a lot of insight from that answer. Dr. Barnard, would you like to add anything to that?
I think that was the perfect summation. I think
right.
Not only do I agree with it, but I've taken careful notes.
Okay, great. So I have a question for Dr. Barnard and Dr. Robertson, which is similar to this, but it has to do with a complete change in lifestyle again, but maybe train for an extreme sport, like an endurance event, like the Ironman, for example. If you suddenly decided, have you done the Ironman? Either of you? I don't know.
Not an Ironman.
Not yet.
No, not yet.
Okay. So if either of you decided that you want to train for the Ironman, or, which is actually very, very different, move to Asia for a long-term project, what are the changes that you would make to your lifestyle? So Anju, of course, mentioned, and from what she was saying, I said you need to be very gentle with the body. You need to nurture the body through that kind of transition and get it to adapt to a completely different world from what it's used to. So how would you do that, Dr. Robertson?
Yeah, I think it's a process, isn't it? You know, just like when you're exercising, you don't, not exercise at all and then the next day suddenly do an Ironman. You have to spend weeks and weeks and months where you learn, where you run 1 mile, you run 2 miles, you swim 1 mile, and so on and so forth, and you build up to it. And it has to be exactly the same with your nutrition as well. You will learn that if you are training for an Ironman or some big sporting event, you slowly have to build up your body to tolerate the more protein, for example, that it needs after you've done a big exercise. You need to learn to feed your body a bit more before you do these exercises. So day by day, you're taking in more, for example, carbohydrates before you exercise to give you all those carbohydrate stores, those sugar stores to use as energy. And it's just the same if I was moving abroad. You have to learn to let your body adapt, as Anju said. So if I was moving to India, for example, and I was kind of moving there for a year-long time, I'm not going to spend my time going to McDonald's every day and eating westernized foods. That wouldn't, personally I wouldn't enjoy that, but also, you want to learn to integrate and eat the foods that are there. So I do it slowly. I wouldn't every day go out and eat, exactly what you'd eat every day, Milind, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But slowly but surely, I'd add some of these kind of spices, these kind of dal, slowly kind of eat more kind of the curry and things like that maybe my body isn't so used to. And so allowing your body to kind of go along that process, I think is so important. Because we see that if you look at the gut microbiome studies, if someone is a traveler and they go to India, they go to South America or Southeast Asia, and they're from, Europe like myself, or from North America, travelers' diarrhea is so common because their body isn't used to all these different types of microorganisms. Yeah. And actually, if you take certain types of probiotic bacteria beforehand, it can actually reduce the incidence of travelers' diarrhea. But if we allowed ourselves that time, if we could take holidays that were longer than 1 week or 2 weeks to these places and allowed our bodies to kind of integrate slowly by slowly taking in these different foods day by day, and our bodies can adapt and our gut microbiomes can adapt as well. We can see that people who move from one country to another, their gut microbiome will adapt and turn more to like those within that environment. So we need to give it the time and the process to do that.
Sure. Okay, so one more question for you about similar, about the Ironman, for example, or let's say an extreme endurance event. If you were training for that, it is the training itself is a pressure on the body, on the entire system, even on the mind, on the body, all of it. How would you develop or design a diet for yourself that would take that pressure, that intense physical pressure over, say, 3 or 4 months, because or more, 6 months. Sometimes people train for a year to do Ironman. So what would you do? How would you design a diet?
I mean, if you're talking about extreme exercise, I haven't done an Ironman. I've done a marathon before. The kind of basic principles of that are taking in carbohydrates or loading up on carbohydrate stores before your training or before your exercise, because your body breaks down glycogen. It breaks down all these sugars, the carbohydrate stores first, before then, if it has to, it'll go into the fat stores. So you do need some long-term fat stores as well. So you want to be integrating some good fats into your diet. And then after you've trained, it's really important to take in protein. So maybe Dr. Barnard wouldn't like it, but certainly you could either have animal sources of protein, you could have plant sources of protein, that's fine. Beans and lentils and legumes are very good for protein as well. So I suppose you have to take in a lot more energy than you might be used to. If you're exercising that much, to do an Ironman, you're expending thousands and thousands of calories. So it might seem that you don't want to eat all of this food. It might seem that you think you're going to gain weight or something, but you're going to be expending all that weight as well. So you have to learn to take in a huge amount of calories as well over that 3 or 4 month period before you can return back to normal.
Right.
I will take the liberty of commenting if you don't mind.
It was coming to you. Yes, with the same question. With the same question.
I think there was this idea that you've broken down some protein, so you have to shove a whole lot of protein from animal sources, and there's almost a kind of a rather goofy religion in the world of athletics about exactly this food or that food. Your car requires a certain fuel, and so does your body. And years ago, Scott Jurek and Brendan Brazier and Rich Roll and many others discovered that not only can you fuel your exercise with plant-based foods, but just as importantly, you want to fuel your recovery. And what they discovered is that when people eat animal products, their recovery is poorer. They're not able to get back to exercising as well. And when they go on plant-based diets, they do dramatically better. And in my office here, one of the doctors who runs the Barnard Medical Center decided that his gift to himself for his 60th birthday was to run a triathlon, an Ironman. He trained for it, did it entirely on a plant-based diet, discovered that his ability to perform was dramatically improved by it. And so that's what we recommend now for everyone. It should be a balanced diet with grains and beans and vegetables and fruits. You do need vitamin B12, and that's got to be supplemented. But you put those things together, and you'll find that you do a whole lot better than if we try to do it with the old-fashioned meaty way of eating.
Okay. So there is a new, and this question is again for you, Dr. Barnard. There is a debate, actually. And I know because this is also on my page, and I run marathons and so on. So there'll be a lot of endurance runners and endurance athletes out here. There is a debate about the pressure, which I mentioned earlier, on the system, on the body system itself, on the liver, on the kidneys, on all the organs, the amount of training, and also the actual event itself. How can we better prepare for that when it comes to food? Because like we discussed, that it might be like, oh, you need lots of protein, so let's eat lots of cheese and lots of meat and lots of that. But even that may not be the healthy way to go. Could you make it easier for the body to deal with that pressure?
The foods we need are still the same foods. You're going to need a lot more because you're consuming you're burning up an enormous number of calories. At rest, in a day you might burn 1,800 calories or 2,000 calories. But if you're running a marathon or a triathlon, you're consuming many times that. But the foods are still the same. In the same way as when you are breathing during a marathon, you are breathing much faster. You're taking in more oxygen than you were otherwise, but you don't need a different mix. It's still air, and you still need food, even though you're consuming much more of it. And so the same food groups still apply, and those are vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think we have exceeded our time limit, but I'm just thinking, is there any other question that I'd like to ask? I think the answers have been just so amazing. I think what you've had to say, especially the washing the food part of it, that was just incredible. And such a simple thing. I think the whole thing for us to understand is that, I know I've called all of you because you're experts, you're doctors and so on, but we don't really need to go that deep into it. We don't need to get technical about it. What we need to do is be in touch with the body. We need to listen to the body, spend time with the body, spend time with ourselves. As Anju mentioned, rest is such an important thing as opposed to just sleep. Rest the mind, rest the body, calm the whole system down. That is something that is so important that we very rarely do. We're all so busy and we're doing so much. And other than that, eat a variety of food. Don't remove any particular thing from your diet unless you have an absolutely a reason to do that. Eat a variety, eat seasonal, be responsible to the environment, and be responsible to yourself. I think it's been fantastic. I thank you all very, very much. I'm going to be very interested to see the questions that have come up during this discussion, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them. For the audience, the next session is about adaptability and sustainability. And it's going to be a summation of all the sessions that we've had so far, which is about physical fitness, mental health, nutrition, lifestyle, and of course, all the changes we want to make to our lives or not, in order to have the best lives possible in the future. Because the reason why we're doing this webinar is because the future is so uncertain. Not that it hasn't been, but it's brought to us so dramatically at this point in time that the future is uncertain. We don't know what the world is going to be in America, in India, in Europe, everywhere, in Africa. Everything is going to be different, and we don't know what. And there's a lot of panic and worry about that. So it's good to know that we don't need to worry and we don't need to panic. The power is within us. We need to understand ourselves better, understand our minds better, understand our bodies better, and there will be no challenge that we cannot overcome. So thank you again so much from the bottom of my heart for all of you to be here. Anju, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Barnard. Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Thank you. I hope you had a good.
Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, it was wonderful. Thank you.
Likewise.